Sometimes, life traps you in a room with no doors. You look around, no exits, no windows, no air. People stare at you, waiting for you to break, waiting for you to fall. They've already written the story of your defeat. They've already buried you in their minds. But then something happens, something they never saw coming. You move differently. You rise when you shouldn't. You create doors where none existed. And suddenly, their rules no longer apply to you. Their logic fails to explain you. You've just done something no one can understand. But you always knew you would. Watch this video till the end. Like and subscribe if you're ready to become the version of yourself they could never predict. Asterisk, they didn't just doubt you. They built walls around you, quietly, carefully. They called it love. They called it protection. They called it the way things are. But they were building a cage made of their expectations, their rules, their comfort zones. They told you who you're supposed to be. They handed you labels like weapons, hoping you'd aim them at yourself. And maybe, for a while, you did. Maybe you stayed where they put you. You walked in circles inside their little world, trying so hard to fit. You learned how to shrink so they wouldn't feel small next to you. You learned how to be silent when your voice wanted to roar. But here's the truth you were never meant to find: that cage. The key, it was always in your hand, but you were too busy believing them, too busy trying to be what they needed you to be. It's not the cage that's strong. It's the story they sold you about why you can't leave. They made you believe that stepping out would destroy something: your relationships, your worth, your place in this world. They made you think that if you stopped following their map, you'd get lost forever. But the only thing you lose when you leave is their version of you. And that's not a loss. That's the beginning. You were never meant to stay small so others could stay comfortable. You were never meant to walk a path someone else paved just because it's easier to explain. And maybe it took you years. Maybe it took you breaking, collapsing, suffocating inside those invisible bars to finally see it. But now you do. You see the key. You feel its weight in your hand. You don't need permission to unlock the door. You don't need their applause when you walk out. You just need to remember who you are when you're not trapped inside their story. When you step out, when you leave that cage behind, something happens. The walls don't fall. The cage doesn't disappear. It stays, but it can no longer hold you. Because you were never really trapped. You were just convinced you were. And now, you're free. Asterisk, there comes a moment when you get tired of explaining yourself. Tired of proving tired of performing, tired of shouting into a room that was never listening in the first place. You've spent so much time trying to be heard that you forgot what your own silence feels like. You've been loud because they taught you that noise is power. They taught you that the one who speaks the most, who fights the hardest, who never stays quiet, that's the one who wins. But what if they were wrong? What if your silence is louder than your voice has ever been? You don't always have to fight with words. You don't always have to push to be understood. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to pull back, to stop speaking, to stop explaining, to stop feeding the noise with more noise. Because when you go quiet, something shifts. People start leaning in. They start wondering. Start listening to what's not being said. Your silence can break them in ways your words never could. But this isn't about manipulation. This isn't about games. It's about finding your own center when the world is pulling you in every direction. It's about realizing that you don't owe anyone a performance. You don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep the room warm. You don't have to keep breaking yourself just to stay visible. There's a strength in retreating. There's a quiet kind of power in sitting with yourself, holding your own space, making moves they can't see. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them feel the weight of your absence. You don't need to defend every step you take. You don't need to fight every battle that invites you in. Silence is not surrender. It's not weakness. It's not fear. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest edge you can carry. Because when you finally choose quiet, you stop wasting your energy on being heard, and you start using it to build something they'll never see coming. And when you return, you won't need to speak. Your presence will say everything. Asterisk, there comes a point where you can't keep performing. You can't keep standing on the same stage, wearing the same face, living the same story, just because they're used to it. You feel it, that tightness in your chest when you smile, that silence in your throat when you speak. You know you've outgrown the version of you they still expect to see. But they don't notice. They cheer, they clap, they pull you deeper into the role you no longer want to play. And you stay because it's easier than walking away. You stay because disappearing feels like losing everything. But sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. There are seasons where you must step away, not to run, not to escape, but to rebuild, far from their eyes, far from their words, far from their comfort. You need that silence. You need that distance. You need the space where no one is shaping you, no one is watching you, no one is holding you to the person you used to be. Because growth doesn't happen when you're being observed. It happens in the dark, behind closed doors, in the long hours when no one's looking. That's where you tear it all down. That's where you start over. That's where you learn what's real. And yes, people will notice you're gone. They'll wonder. They'll ask. They'll wait for you to come back the same, to step back into their story, to fit where you used to fit. But you won't. When you return, you will not be the version they remember. You will not shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You will not wear the name they gave you or the skin they grew familiar with. You've built yourself differently now. You've redesigned your mind, your boundaries, your entire way of breathing, and you don't owe them the old you. That version doesn't live here anymore. And maybe that's the point. You, maybe disappearing wasn't the loss they thought it was. Maybe it was the beginning. You will spend years trying to be understood. You will twist yourself into smaller shapes just to fit inside their narrow view of you. You will explain. You will defend. You will exhaust yourself trying to make people see what you see, feel what you feel, believe what you believe. And yet, they won't. They will look at you through the cracks of their own fears. They will filter your story through the lens of their own limits. They will call you confused, arrogant, lost, or broken, not because you are, but because it makes them feel safer. It makes them feel bigger. It makes them feel like they still understand the world. And when they don't understand you, they will try to shrink you. They will try to pull you back into the version they can recognize, the version that makes sense to them, the version that keeps you where they can still control you. You will feel the urge to explain yourself again, to prove that you're good, to prove that your path is valid, to prove that you're not as crazy as they've made you feel. But this is where everything shifts. The moment you stop needing them to understand you, that's the moment you finally start living. Because you were not built to fit inside their story. You are not here to color inside lines they drew long before you even arrived. You are not responsible for the limits they refuse to outgrow. They will misunderstand you. Let them question you. Let them twist your story. Let them tell the wrong version of you at their tables, in their rooms, inside their small, familiar worlds. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to chase their approval. You don't need to bring your truth down to a level they can easily digest. Because you are not here to be easy to understand. You're here to become something they cannot explain. The more they misunderstand you, the more you know you're stepping into who you really are. And one day they'll see it. Or maybe they won't. it won't matter, because by then you'll already be far beyond the version of yourself they were busy trying to label. Asterisk. They think they know you. They think they're watching your every step. They think they've mapped your next move, like you're predictable, like you're just another piece on their board. But what they don't see, what they'll never see, are the nights you've spent building in silence, the mornings where you rose before the world, not to prove something, but to become something. Your most dangerous strength has always been this: you don't need an audience to evolve. You don't need their attention to get stronger. You've learned how to make moves in the dark, how to grow in the quiet places where no one is looking. Because real growth isn't loud. It's not posted. It's not celebrated. It happens when no one's watching. It happens when no one's clapping. It happens when you're sitting alone, piecing together a version of yourself no one else could ever design. The world only sees the explosion. They only notice when something suddenly changes, when you break the pattern, when you step out and you're not the person they remember. They call it overnight success. They call it luck. They call it impossible. But they never saw the invisible steps that built it. You didn't broadcast your battles. You didn't parade your plans. You moved quietly, deliberately. You let them underestimate you. You let them sleep on you. You gave them nothing to track, nothing to study, nothing to block. And that's why it worked. You became a force, not because you shouted, but because you moved when no one thought you were moving. You became dangerous because you knew when to speak and when to go silent. You knew that power isn't in being seen. It's in being unstoppable. Whether they see you or not, there is a discipline in walking your path without applause. There is a freedom in letting them think you're standing still. Because when you finally arrive, when you finally break through, when the walls collapse and the doors swing open, they won't understand how you got there. They won't see the 1,000 invisible steps that carried you here, but you will, and that's the only thing that matters. Asterisk. There's this version of winning they've sold you. The one with loud crowds, shiny trophies, flashing lights. The one where they tell you when you've made it and when you haven't. But what they don't say is how often their version of winning leaves you empty. How it drags you into chasing things you don't even want, just so you can say you arrived where they said you should. You've probably felt that weight, running towards something because everyone else is running, fighting battles that were never yours to fight, trying to fit into lanes they built for people who don't look like you, think like you, live like you. And when they block your way, when they slam the doors shut, when they tell you there's no space for you, something inside you breaks. At first, because they've trained you to believe that if you're not winning their way, then you're losing. But what if that's the lie? What if walking away isn't losing? What if stepping off their map isn't quitting? There's a kind of victory they'll never understand. The kind where you stop begging for a seat at their table. The kind where you stop chasing the doors they keep slamming in your face. The kind where you turn your back on the path they blocked and you build your own a path no one believed could exist. Winning isn't always the roar of the crowd. Sometimes it's the quiet of choosing yourself. Sometimes it's walking alone. Sometimes it's saying, I don't need what you're offering. And that's when the shift happens. That's when you realize the finish line they drew doesn't mean anything. If it was never meant for you, you start building something they can't measure. You start living by terms they can't control. And maybe it won't look like winning to them. Maybe they'll never clap for you. Maybe they'll never understand why you walked away. But that's okay, because the loudest victories are not always heard. They're lived. Asterisk. There's a version of you they can handle. The version that makes sense to them. The version that fits into their boxes, speaks in their language, moves in ways they can track. They like that version. It's predictable, manageable. It makes them feel safe. But what happens when you stop living for their understanding? What happens when you grow into something they can no longer label, no longer explain, no longer hold inside their limited view of you? At first, it feels like you're losing them. They pull back. They question you. They whisper about how you've changed. And maybe part of you wants to pull yourself back into their comfort zone, to stay in the version they liked. Because it's easier to be accepted than to be questioned. It's easier to be explained than to be misunderstood. But here's the thing. If they can fully explain you, you've made yourself too small. You've trimmed your edges to fit their frame. You've kept your steps measured so they can follow. And all the while, you've been building a life that isn't yours. You weren't born to be explained. You weren't made to be understood in the first glance. There's a part of you that is meant to be untouchable, unpredictable, beyond what they can grasp. The moment you step into that space, where you stop apologizing for being different, where you stop slowing down to be easier to follow, that's when you start becoming something else entirely. You become the story they can't tell. You become the question they can't answer. You become the mystery they can't solve. And maybe that scares them. Maybe they'll try to bring you back. Maybe they'll call you distant or difficult or lost. But you're not lost. You've just moved somewhere they can't reach. You've stepped into a life they never imagined for you. You've become something they didn't have the words for. And maybe you're just now realizing that you don't need their words anymore. You don't need their permission to keep evolving, to keep shifting, to keep growing into the unexplainable version of yourself. The world will always try to make you simple, but you were never here to be simple. You were here to become something they can't define, and maybe that's the point. To be unexplainable, even to yourself. Asterisk, you spend so much of your life trying to make your story easier for other people to hear. You soften the hard parts. You skip the messy chapters. You wrap your pain in polite words so they won't look at you with discomfort. But do you ever wonder who you're really doing that for? You bend your story so they can sit with it. You shrink your truth so they can stay comfortable. You leave out the parts that made you question yourself, that made you cry alone, that made you nearly give up because you've been told that people don't want to hear the whole thing. They want the clean version, the neat version, the version that makes sense. But your story didn't come from a clean place. Your story was built in the cracks, in the disappointments, in the failures, in the moments you were left standing with nothing but your own heartbeat keeping you going. And you're not here to keep their comfort intact. Your story will make some people uncomfortable. It will disturb them. It will stretch them. It will challenge what they think they know about you, about themselves. Some people will listen to your story and quietly walk away because they're not ready to hold the weight of it. Let them. Your story isn't meant for everyone's comfort. It's meant for your freedom. You didn't go through everything you survived just to cut your story into pieces that fit neatly on their shelf. You didn't rebuild yourself just to be digestible. You didn't bleed just to make someone else feel safe. Your story, exactly as it is, matters. Not because it's easy to hear, but because it's real. Because it's yours. Because it carries the weight of what you've endured, not the version that makes others feel okay, but the version that speaks to the person you've become. There will always be people who prefer the pretty version of you, the version that doesn't shake the ground beneath them, the version that plays small to keep their world in place. But you were not made to carry their comfort. You were made to carry your truth. And maybe that's what freedom really looks like. When you finally tell your story without trimming the edges, without apologizing, without making yourself smaller just to fit into their piece. Your story is not for their comfort. It's for your liberation. Asterisk, sometimes life feels like a locked room. You walk in thinking you have options, thinking you're in control. But slowly, the walls close in. The doors slam behind you. People circle you with their words, their rules, their timelines, and before you know it, they've already decided how your story ends. They watch you like you're finished. They wait for you to break. Silence, the tightening space around you. You fight the walls. You chase the exits they've sealed. You pound on doors that won't open. And the harder you push, the more trapped you feel. But maybe the mistake was believing those were the only doors. It's not through the front door they shut. It's not the path they left for you. Sometimes the real exit is the one you quietly build yourself, far from where they're watching. They wanted you to keep pushing where they controlled the game. But when you stop playing their game, everything changes. You start looking elsewhere. You start building elsewhere. You start moving in ways they never planned for. And that's the exit they never saw. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's not the ending they expected, but it's yours. Maybe they'll still be standing by the locked doors, waiting to see you fall, never realizing you've already left. The exit they never saw. And that's where you begin again, on your terms.